September 9 AD, 3 Roman legions are marching through a forest in northwestern Germania. They cannot see more than a few meters in any direction. The trees press in from both sides. The ground is soft from recent rain. The column stretches for miles. Soldiers, horses, supply wagons, civilians, servants, all moving in a long, slow line through terrain that Roman armies were never designed to fight in. Nobody is alarmed. They have done this march before. They know this region. Their commander has been governing it for years. What they do not know, what nobody in that column knows, is that tens of thousands of Germanic warriors are standing silently in the trees on both sides of them, watching, waiting. The attack, when it comes from everywhere at once. And when it is over, 3 entire Roman legions, the 17th, 18th, and 19th, have ceased to exist. Not defeated, not retreated, erased. To understand what happened in the Teutoburg forest, you first have to understand what Rome believed about itself in 9 AD. Augustus Caesar had been ruling for over 3 decades. The civil wars that had torn the Republic apart were over. The empire was stable, prosperous, expanding. Rome had already absorbed Gaul, modern-day France, under Julius Caesar. Spain was Roman, North Africa was Roman, Greece, Asia Minor, Egypt, all Roman. The Rhine River marked the northeastern frontier. Beyond it was Germania, wild, forested, tribal. Rome looked at Germania the way it had looked at every other territory it eventually absorbed, as a future province. The plan was already underway. Roman administrators had moved in, tax collection had begun, Roman law was being introduced, Roman roads were being planned. Augustus wanted the frontier pushed from the Rhine to the Elbe River, deeper into Germanic territory. It would shorten the border, make it easier to defend, and bring more of Europe under Roman control. The man he sent to make this happen was Publius Quinctilius Varus. Key players: Varus, the wrong man in the wrong place. Varus was not a military genius. He was an administrator, a competent one, a loyal one, a man with good family connections. He had been married to a grandniece of Augustus. He had governed Syria successfully, managed finances, kept order. But Syria was a province with cities, infrastructure, and populations already accustomed to Roman rule. Germania was entirely different. The Germanic tribes were not city dwellers. They had no fixed administrative centers Rome could take over, no existing tax systems Rome could redirect, no roads. They lived in scattered settlements, moved seasonally, organized themselves around tribal loyalty and warrior culture. And they had watched what Rome did to Gaul. They were not going to let it happen to them. Most of the tribal leaders made this clear through continued resistance. But one man told Varus something different. Arminius. His name in the Roman sources is Arminius. His Germanic name is lost to history. He is, by any honest assessment, one of the most remarkable figures of the ancient world, and one of the least known outside of specialist history. Arminius was a chieftain of the Cherushi tribe, but he was also something unusual for a Germanic leader. He had served in the Roman army. As a young man, likely taken as a hostage or offered as a political gesture by his tribe, he had been raised partly in Rome. He had been educated in Roman military tactics. He had served as an auxiliary commander. He had been granted Roman citizenship. He had achieved the rank of equestrian, a level of social standing in Rome that most people never reached. He spoke Latin fluently. He understood Roman military organization from the inside. He knew exactly how a Roman legion moved, how it formed, how it communicated, what its strengths were. And he knew something just as important. He knew its weaknesses. A Roman legion in open terrain was almost unbeatable. In a forest, moving in a long column, with supply wagons slowing everything down, with no room to form its battle lines, that was a different question entirely. Arminius went back to Germania, and he started planning. Cause and effect, the trust that made everything possible. Varus trusted Arminius completely. Not naivety exactly. It was a reasonable trust given the information Varus had. Arminius was Roman educated, Roman trained, a Roman citizen. He had served Rome loyally. He socialized with Varus personally, attended his dinners. He was, from Varus's perspective, exactly the kind of local leader Rome cultivated, a man who had internalized Roman values, who benefited from Roman favor, who had every reason to maintain the relationship. According to ancient sources, at least one warning reached Varus. A Germanic chieftain named Segestes, who was, not coincidentally, the father of a woman Arminius had taken against Sergestes' wishes, told Varus directly that Arminius was planning a revolt. Varus dismissed it. He interpreted it as tribal politics, a personal grudge, a father making accusations against a man he already hated for personal reasons. He was wrong. But it's worth pausing on this for a moment because Varus was not stupid, he was not reckless. He made the assessment a reasonable man with reasonable information would make. Arminius had constructed the deception that carefully. Escalation, the trap is set. The summer of 9 AD had been quiet. Varus was preparing to move his 3 legions from their summer camp near the Weser River back toward their winter quarters on the Rhine. A routine march, a march they had made before. Arminius provided the trigger. He brought reports to Varus of a minor uprising in a nearby region. Nothing serious, just a small local disturbance that needed a Roman military presence to settle quickly. He offered to serve as a guide, to lead Varus's army through a shortcut, through the forest. Arminius rode out ahead, to scout, supposedly, to prepare the way. In reality, he rode to coordinate the largest Germanic tribal coalition that region had ever assembled. Multiple tribes, thousands of warriors, pre-positioned in the forest on both sides of the Roman route. The warriors had spent weeks, possibly months, preparing the terrain. They had built earthen ramparts along the ridgeline, low walls that Germanic fighters could shelter behind and attack from. They had cleared their own lines of movement through the trees while leaving the Roman path narrow and hemmed in. They had planned for rain, for mud, for the specific conditions that would slow a Roman column and prevent Roman cavalry from operating effectively. This was not an ambush of opportunity. This was an engineered destruction. Building dread slowly. The Roman column entered the forest. Picture what that column looked like. 3 legions of infantry, roughly 15,000 soldiers at full strength, though some historians estimate the total force, including auxiliaries, at closer to 20,000. Add the cavalry, the engineers, the artillery units, ballistae, mounted on wagons. Add the non-combatants, servants, traders who travelled with the army, women, children, the civilian population that attached itself to any large Roman military movement. The whole column stretched for perhaps 15 kilometres. 15 kilometres of men, horses, wagons, animals, moving at the pace of the slowest wagon through narrow forest track. The legions marched in a standard column formation, soldiers in rows, discipline intact, equipment clean and ordered. But the formation that made a Roman army lethal, the ability to deploy quickly into battle lines, to form the famous testudo, to use coordinated unit tactics, required space. Open space, flat ground, room to maneuver. The Teutoburg forest gave them none of that. Trees on both sides, marshy ground beneath, rain beginning to fall, and then the attack came. The ambush, controlled, immersive, specific. It did not begin with a battle cry. According to ancient accounts, primarily the historian Velleius Paterculus, who wrote within living memory of the events, and later Cassius Dio, who compiled the most detailed surviving account, the attack began from concealment. Javelins and arrows first, coming from the trees, from the ridgeline, from positions the Romans could not see and could not reach. The column buckled. Men at the front were hit, men in the middle were hit, simultaneously. There was no clear direction to respond to. A Roman legion trained to respond to an enemy it could see and charge. It trained to absorb an initial volley and then advance, closing the distance, using its shields, using its short swords in close combat. None of those responses worked here. Advancing into trees meant abandoning the column. Abandoning the column meant losing unit cohesion. Losing unit cohesion meant losing the only real advantage the legions had. The Germanic warriors were not fighting in the Roman way. They were not forming lines. They were not seeking pitched battle. They attacked from cover, fell back into the trees, attacked again from a different position, disappeared, reappeared, hit and fade, hit and fade. The Romans had almost no answer for it. Day 2, the situation worsens. The first day's fighting was brutal, but the column was still intact. Varus made the decision to push forward, to get out of the forest. That night the Romans made camp. They were disciplined enough to do that, to stop, dig, fortify, even in those conditions. That spoke to how deeply ingrained their training was. But the camp gave only temporary respite. During the night, more Germanic warriors arrived. The coalition was tightening around them. On the second day, the march resumed. The conditions were, if anything, worse. The rain had continued, the ground was softer, the wagons were harder to move, the columns slowed further, and the attacks intensified. According to Cassius Dio, the Romans attempted at various points to respond effectively. They tried to use their engineers to clear trees, to widen the path, to create space for proper formation. The attacks wouldn't allow it. Every attempt to stop and organize was met with another wave of projectiles from the tree line. Every attempt to charge the attackers met warriors who simply melted back into forest the Romans couldn't follow safely. The psychology of the situation was becoming as dangerous as the physical reality.
Hold on. Look at me. We will get through this, all right? Just a little further.
An army that cannot see its enemy, cannot find a target to charge, cannot use its training, cannot do the things it knows how to do. That is an army beginning to lose something harder to measure than men. It is losing belief in its own effectiveness. Day 3. Collapse. The third day, the Roman force was no longer an army in any functional sense. It was a mass of men trying to survive. Some units maintained discipline. Roman centurions, the backbone of the legion system, experienced professionals who had spent careers maintaining order under pressure, tried to hold their men together, but the losses were severe. Ammunition was running low, food was running low, the wounded were slowing everyone down. The cavalry, which might have provided some relief, was largely ineffective in the terrain. Varus was wounded. According to the ancient sources, he made a decision. He fell on his sword. The Roman commander of 3 legions killed himself in the Teutoburg forest, and with his death, whatever remained of central command dissolved. What followed was, depending on which account you read, a combination of desperate breakout attempts, mass surrender, and the final systematic destruction of whatever Roman units could still be found. Some cavalry managed to escape. A small number of soldiers reached the Rhine in safety, but the legions themselves, the 17th, the 18th, the 19th, were gone. Those 3 legion numbers were never used again by Rome. In a military tradition that recycled and reassigned legion numbers routinely, that absence was deliberate, a permanent acknowledgement of what had happened there. Roman shock. The news reached Augustus in Rome. Ancient sources describe his reaction in terms that historians consider credible precisely because they are so uncharacteristic. Augustus, who had ruled for decades with extraordinary composure, who had survived civil wars and political conspiracies and personal tragedies, apparently fell into something close to breakdown. He stopped cutting his hair, stopped shaving, for months. He was reported to bang his head against the walls of his palace, to cry out repeatedly, "Varus, give me back my legions, quintilli ver, legiones reda." Whether he said those exact words, historians cannot confirm. The line comes from the biographer Suetonius, writing over a century later, but the sentiment it captures, the scale of the shock, the personal grief, the disorientation of a man who had believed Roman power was effectively limitless, that seems credible from everything else we know about the period. 3 legions represented roughly 10% of Rome's entire professional army, lost in 3 days in a forest. The strategic consequence: Augustus's plan to push the Roman frontier to the Elbe River died in the Teutoburg forest. It never recovered. Rome made punitive expeditions into Germania afterward. Germanicus, the nephew of the future emperor Tiberius, led major campaigns between 14 and 16 AD. He found the battlefield. He buried the bones of the fallen, still scattered across the forest floor years later, unburied where they fell. He won battles. He recovered 2 of the 3 lost eagle standards, the most sacred objects a Roman legion carried, their loss a profound military and religious disgrace. But Rome did not advance to the Elbe. After Germanicus's campaigns were concluded, recalled by Tiberius, who worried about the cost and the risk, the Rhine remained the frontier. It stayed the Roman frontier for the rest of the empire's existence in the West. Think about what that means geographically. Europe west of the Rhine, France, Spain, Britain, eventually the Low Countries, spent centuries under Roman rule. They absorbed Roman language, Roman law, Roman urban planning, Roman Christianity. They became the core of what would eventually be called Western civilization. East of the Rhine, Germany, Scandinavia, the Slavic regions did not. Their development followed a fundamentally different path. One battle, 3 days in a forest in 9 AD, and the cultural map of Europe is still, in some ways, shaped by it. Arminius did not live to see the long-term consequences of what he had done. After the Teutoburg victory, he was a celebrated figure among the Germanic tribes. But Germanic tribal politics were not kind to military heroes who grew too prominent. He continued fighting Rome through the Germanicus campaigns, won some engagements, lost others, remained unbroken. But inside Germania, jealousy and political rivalry were building. His own uncle became an enemy. His own relatives turned against him. According to Tacitus, the Roman historian who wrote some of the most detailed accounts of this period and who had no particular reason to flatter a Roman enemy, Arminius was killed around 21 AD by members of his own tribe. He was approximately 37 years old. Tacitus wrote something about him that is striking, coming from a Roman historian describing a man who had destroyed 3 Roman legions. He called Arminius the liberator of Germania. He noted that unlike other kings and commanders of the time, Arminius had not fought Rome to make himself rich or powerful in the Roman style. He had fought for something he believed in, and then his own people killed him. History, as usual, did not provide a clean ending. Why it happened? Step back from the battle itself and look at the reasons it happened. Not just the tactical reasons, the deeper ones. The first reason is arrogance, not personal arrogance, though Varus's dismissal of Segestes' warning shows some of that. Institutional arrogance. Rome had been winning for so long against so many different enemies, in so many different environments, that the idea of a genuine military catastrophe had become almost unthinkable. Roman commanders adapted to desert warfare, to naval warfare, to mountain warfare, to siege warfare. But there was a ceiling on adaptation when the institution itself believed it had already solved the problem of war. The second reason is intelligence failure. Arminius was feeding Varus information, selectively, carefully, building trust over years. He had no effective counterintelligence system in Germania, no deep network of informants across multiple tribes, no way to verify what Arminius was telling them against independent sources. They were operating on one man's account of a region they didn't fully understand, and that man was lying. The third reason is terrain. Roman military doctrine was built around a particular kind of warfare: open ground, defined front lines, units that could see each other and coordinate, cavalry that could operate on flanks. The Teutoburg forest negated every single one of those advantages simultaneously. Rome did not have a doctrine for fighting in dense northern European forest against an enemy using guerrilla tactics. Arminius knew this. He chose the ground specifically because of it. The fourth reason, and this one gets overlooked, is that Arminius was genuinely extraordinary. He had the intelligence to understand 2 military systems simultaneously, the Roman one from the inside, the Germanic one from birth. He had the patience to spend years building trust before using it as a weapon. He had the organizational ability to coordinate multiple tribes that frequently fought each other, into a single coherent operation and keep the secret long enough to execute it. And he had the tactical creativity to design a battlefield that removed Roman advantages before the first weapon was thrown. That combination is rare in any century, what Rome learned and didn't. It adapted to some degree after the Teutoburg disaster. Subsequent campaigns into Germania were more cautious, more methodical, more reliant on establishing secure supply lines before advancing, more attentive to local intelligence. Germanicus, who led those campaigns, was a skilled commander who studied what had gone wrong. But the fundamental lesson, that there were environments and enemies against which Roman military doctrine simply did not translate effectively, was never fully absorbed. Rome continued, in various periods of its history, to project the same institutional confidence into situations that didn't warrant it. The arrogance that made Varus dismiss Segestes' warning was not a personal failing that died with Varus. It was a structural feature of an institution that had been successful long enough to mistake past performance for guaranteed future results. There is something in that pattern that is not unique to Rome. It appears in every powerful institution that has ever existed. The ones that forget that their methods were developed for specific conditions, that those conditions can change, that an enemy smart enough to understand your system is an enemy who can dismantle it. Rome should have known this. It had read its own history, but knowing something and truly internalizing it are different things. The battlefield today. For centuries after 9 AD, the precise location of the battle was unknown. Ancient sources describe the general region but not the specific site. Then, in 1987, a British amateur archaeologist named Tony Clun, stationed in Germany with the British Army, began searching a region near Kalkries in Lower Saxony. He used a metal detector. He found Roman coins, then more coins, then military equipment, then lead sling bullets, then pieces of Roman armor. Subsequent professional excavations confirmed it. Kalkries was the battle site, or at least a significant part of it. The battle covered several kilometers, and archaeology is still working through what exactly happened where. What they found was haunting. Roman sandal hobnails, pieces of Larica segmentata armor, cavalry equipment, coins minted specifically during Augustus's reign, and the earthen rampart, still visible after 2,000 years, the raised ridge from which Germanic warriors had poured projectiles down onto soldiers who couldn't see them. The archaeology confirmed the ancient accounts in their essential features. The ambush was real. The terrain was exactly as described. The scale of the destruction was as catastrophic as the sources claimed. There is a museum at Kalkries now. One of the most striking objects in it is a Roman face mask, cavalry parade equipment, bronze, designed to be worn over the face in ceremonial contexts. It was found in the soil of the ambush site. Whoever wore it never made it home. Why this battle matters. The Battle of Teutoburg Forest does not appear in most school history curricula. It is not as famous as Thermopylae, not as studied as Cannae, not as romanticized as Marathon, but its consequences are arguably larger than any of those battles. The division of Europe into a Romanized West and a non-Romanized East, a division that shaped language, law, religion, political cool chair, and eventually the modern borders of nations, was not inevitable. It was, in significant part, the result of 3 days in a forest. Rome had the resources to try again. It had the military capacity to eventually absorb Germania if it had committed fully over decades. It chose not to. The cost in blood and treasure and repeated failure was too high. The Rhine was defensible. The Elbe was not worth what it would take to reach it. And so the line held. For 4 centuries, until Rome's western structure finally collapsed, the Rhine remained the border. East of it, their own laws, their own languages, their own political traditions. The Germanic peoples who never became Roman eventually, centuries later, built the kingdoms that replaced Rome's Western Empire. The Franks, the Visigoths, the Lombards, the Saxons. Their descendants built medieval Europe. Their descendants built modern Germany, France, England, the Low Countries, and the cultural DNA of those places, the legal systems, the political habits, the languages, even the way cities are planned, still carries the echo of that dividing line. The line that Arminius drew with an ambush in a forest that Rome's 3 legions never walked out of. Quiet, considered, final. The bones of the soldiers of the 17th, 18th, and 19th legions lay unburied in the Teutoburg forest for years. When Germanicus's army finally found them, 6 years after the battle, they buried them, soldiers burying soldiers. Men who had never known the dead, honoring the dead anyway, because the dead were Roman, and that still meant something. Germanicus reportedly wept. Tacitus, writing about the scene, described the forest floor scattered with bleached bones, broken weapons, fragments of armor, skulls nailed to trees, the remains of the Roman dead displayed by the victors as trophies. He described his soldiers walking through it in silence, not speaking, just understanding, finally, what had happened there. 17,000 men, maybe more, had marched into a forest believing that being Roman made them invincible. And they had met a man who had learned everything Rome had to teach and used it against them. The legions were gone, the numbers were never reassigned. And the forest, for a long time after, remained simply what it had always been: quiet, dark, full of trees, indifferent to what empires believed about themselves. If this changed how you think about the battles that actually shaped the world, subscribe. The history that doesn't get taught is often the history that matters most.